qualifications and my background. So when I think about that idea of your background, it's what makes you the person that you are today. And when I think about the qualifications, it's all the things that I've been able to do and the things that I've learned as a result of doing those things. So when I think about my background, I have to start by saying I am a child of poverty, a first generation college graduate. And I feel like those things shaped me to be the educator that I am today. And I also believe that having a mother who sowed seeds in me about you can do anything that you want to be able to do, and having teachers along the way who also encourage and sow that seed, and seeing that I have a love for learning that I still have today. And so I feel like that has really led me to become the person that I am today. And so my background being a product of public education, and that's what I spent my career doing, being a seed sower and a servant of public education. Because I think where a child starts, their zip code never determines where they're going to end. And so that's what's been my life's work, and what it continues to be is about really thinking about what are the equitable opportunities that we can provide for any student, regardless of where they started their journey, to be able to reach whatever the potential is that they feel like they want to be able to do. So those are the things that have led me to the person that I am today. And I think about that as an educational leader who's really spent my life in really sowing seeds and encouraging others, as people did for me. Graduated, born and reared in Winfield, educated from the public Winfield High School, went to Southern University and HBCU, and all of those things have helped to shape my understanding of who I am and what I needed to be. Because growing up in the 80s, I didn't see a lot of people who necessarily looked like me, who were going to college and having those opportunities. So being in an environment where people nurtured my love of learning and nurtured the potential that they saw in me was what led me to, Southern University, because for one, I was able to get a scholarship. And when you grow up poor, you got to have help to go to college, because it wasn't something that we would have been able to do on our own. So I also got a master's and a +30 from Northwestern, and I completed my doctoral coursework at Louisiana Tech. Have not finished the degree yet because life just has not let that happen, but it's still there. It's still looking at me. And so those are some of my educational background. But when I think about my qualifications in terms of the things that I've done that make me the person I am today, I'll start with my earliest career at Goldana Elementary. There were 3 people who looked like me on that staff. We were what you would call early innovators, because people were not beating down the door of people who looked like me to go teach at Goldana. But we did, and spent all of my time there until I got ready to get married. And that's when it was time to come to the city, because we worked as a cohesive unit and we worked as a team to build coalitions and to help people understand that all of the students, the community, they needed to see people who look like me as well, because everybody needs to understand that all of us together make things better. And so that was really part of that experience that helped to shape my knowledge of really understanding that no matter how you look, you have things that you can offer, and there are things that can be learned regardless of that. Then I spent time at Parks Elementary, which was a different type of school. Spent time at the Middle Lab School. Then I had the opportunity to become the principal at LP Bond, and at that time, went through 2 transitions at LP Bond. When I was going to be the principal of LP Bond, it was clearly understood that the school was an F, and that part of the reason that I was going to go to that school was to be able to build a cohesive team of people who, first of all, believed that every child in that building could achieve. And that was the first thing we started with, a belief. We built a coalition around the belief in what children were able to do. Spent time at LP Bond, and when my husband's job allowed him to transfer, then we had to go to Southeast Louisiana. We were able to move LP Bond from an F to a D. which it had never been before. It had always been an F. But it wasn't just me, it was a cohesive team of people who believed and were committed to the work that we were doing. I went to Southeast Louisiana. I got a job at Hammond Elementary, which was a high poverty, about 94% free and reduced. First year, we were able to grow that school 10 points. At the end of that year, the superintendent came and said, I want to send you to another school. I said, oh no, please, my work here is not done. He came to me 3 times and I pleaded each time. The last time he came, he said, you're going to, and he moved me to another school. I went to another school, about 800 kids. It was a 5th and 6th grade school. When I went to that school, it was a D. Stayed there, brought that school to a C. Then I had the opportunity to go to the central office to become a supervisor of federal programs. That really built my understanding about budgeting, resource allocation, and really how to use both human and financial resource to really impact teaching and learning, which is the whole purpose of what we do in the educational system. After doing that, the superintendent came back. He said, I want to move you to the position of the chief desegregation officer. I said, I don't want to do that. He said, we're moving you to that office because you bring something that we need. And so my role in that position was really to deal with equity, about providing equitable opportunities to ensure that every student in our district, which was 20,000 students, 80% free and reduced, the 6th highest poverty rate of the 15 largest districts in Louisiana. So that's what I spent that time doing. And then when the opportunity came, he said, I want you to become the chief academic officer. So in that role, I had a multi-million-dollar budget. I dealt with everything that had to do with instruction, academics, and human capital related to instruction. And so all of those things have shaped me to the ministry that I call educational leadership, because it's a calling, it's what I believe in. And so that's why I'm here tonight, to talk about my calling as an educational leader and what I think I can bring to Natchitoches Parish to move Natchitoches to the next level.
Okay. Mrs. Hamilton, were you ready for us to break into questions?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any follow-up to her opening remarks? Any questions? Mrs. Hamilton, we will be taking notes, so we won't be making total eye contact. We apologize for that in advance. But thank you for being here. Mr. Eugene?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your application. What is the biggest barrier in education today, and how will you work to foster students in spite of those barriers?
Ms. Hamilton, please start. The question should be
In front of you there too.
That way you can see them.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, all right, now.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, perfect.
Mr. Eugene, could you repeat that question?
Yeah. Just repeating the question. What is the biggest barrier in education today, and how will you work to foster students in spite of the barriers?
Well, I think, as I talked about my experiences, I think, when we think about this idea of equitable opportunities for all students, because in my role now, I work with schools and districts all across the state of Louisiana and all across the country. And the daily challenge that they're really thinking about is how are we ensuring that what we are doing is providing the best opportunities for students to be able to go out and be college and career ready. So when you think about that, how am I going to foster that? Well, first of all, we're going to start with a clear understanding of where we are when it comes to providing opportunities. And the way we start and build that understanding is around really talking about what our data shows us, because we have to be data driven in order to inform the decisions that we're making. Because we may have feelings and thoughts, and we even may have hope. And I say this all the time. Hope is a good thing to have, but it's not an educational strategy. You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to look at the data, and we're going to identify what are the 1 or 2 barriers that when we prioritize that we feel like we can do when we're thinking about providing equitable opportunities for all students in Natchitoches Parish school system. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Wilson? Ms. Palmer?
We have a large African American student population here in Natchez Parish. How do you foresee enhancing meaningful administrative positions for qualified African Americans throughout our parish?
I think it goes back to what we just talked about. First of all, we look at our human resources data and we look at our data and we see, okay, what is our data telling us about the ability to attract, retain individuals from diverse backgrounds, because we want all of our students in our districts to see individuals in leadership and in the classroom who are representative of the collective body of Natchez Parish. So we have to be really strategic. And in my role as a minority recruiter and a desegregation officer, that was about 50% of what my time was spent on going to HBCUs, going to civic, fraternal, sorority, universities, really talking about what is it that we have to offer. And that's the same thing we want to do here. We have to tell our story, because if we don't, somebody else tells our story. So we have to really highlight the important factors and the things that we have here in Natchez. For one, we have Northwestern State University, and they have a program called Call Me Mister. And that program is designed to attract African American males to education. And we don't wait until they get to college. We start in junior high. We start looking for and planting the seeds for individuals about becoming an educator, becoming a leader in the educational system. And we also do that by you improve a school system from within. So we start to look around in our district and we identify, hey, we need to have these pools. Here are people who have the potential to be teacher leaders. So we start them there. We have outstanding teachers who are impacting student achievement based on their data. We start looking at those individuals and we start providing opportunities for them to lead. Then you start identifying your teacher leaders. Then from those teacher leaders, you start to build a pool of APs, assistant principals, administrative assistants. From that pool, you start to build a pool of principals. From that pool, you start to build a pool of district leaders. So it's a recursive cycle that you're building from within, because the thing we know is that nobody is going to come from without to save you. You have to have a strategy within your district of how you are going to build capacity and be able to have multiple career paths to allow people opportunities to be able to succeed at every level within the district.
Any follow-up from Ms. Hamilton? Okay, Mr. Nancy?
What is your experience with budgets, and what process would you use to prepare a budget?
So when I think about this idea of budgeting, first of all, we know that when it comes to budgeting, we have to be fiscally responsible. We have to be transparent, because one of the things that we have to be able to talk about to the community is, for one thing, we know education is public business, and economic development in a district is tied to what happens in public education. Because if we want businesses to come to Natchez, well, I can tell you, one of the first things they're going to do, they're going to go look at the school systems. They're going to see, first of all, is there going to be a workforce? Are we preparing individuals to be college and career ready? Then the second thing they're going to think about, those individuals who are in the top leadership positions in a company, well, they're bringing their families. And the first thing they're going to see is, okay, what schools are available to me for my child? And I feel like our role here is to make our schools so attractive that it puts pressure on a person to send their child not to a public school. We have to put that kind of pressure in terms of what we have to offer, so that it makes it a really difficult decision for somebody to say, other than they may have religious reasons why they choose another school. But when it comes to the quality of our schools, we have to have every school being able to provide a high quality education so that we can attract individuals into our public schools.
I want to follow up with that. How would you handle a budget deficit? And what items would you review?
Well, here's how we've always looked at in terms of my experiences from federal programs. First of all, you know that there's a limited amount of money that you have. So you're gonna first look at that, you're gonna look at your expenditures, and you know that when it comes to budgeting, about 75% of your money is spent on people. It's salaries, benefits, and insurance. So what you have to do is you have to really start to look at roles and responsibilities in terms of, are you maximizing the people that you have to get the most out of those individuals? Because it's not about their title, it's about what's the skill set that they have and what roles and responsibilities can we bring. And then the other thing is you have to look at return on investment, because we may be doing this particular thing, but when we start to track it down to the classroom level when it comes to student achievement, if there's no impact on student achievement, then that means everything is up for discussion when it comes to budgeting.
Okay, any follow-up? Mr. Gasky?
How would you ensure that all our teachers complete cultural diversity training?
So when you think about that, you know, there are two aspects to diversity change, training, and then there's cultural responsiveness, and then there's cultural competency. So when you think about diversity, that's just acknowledging that there are differences. But when you start to think about cultural responsiveness, that's when you really start to look at, well, what are the similarities and the differences between norms and groups, and you're really having an open dialogue about those differences. And then the other thing that you're doing is you're really trying to weave that into the learning experiences for students and the training that you provide for the adults who are working with those children. So it's a layered approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but you have to start with, first of all, acknowledgement through discussion and understanding. When we say cultural responsiveness in Natchitoches Parish, everybody in our district has to have a clear understanding, but what does that mean? What does it look and what does it sound like? And that's how you start to go at attacking, maybe bringing more awareness or knowledge, and then you go out and you give people who that's what they do. Because there are organizations who that's what they spend their work doing. They do cultural responsiveness training, they do diversity training. But first of all, you have to look internally to determine, where is our greatest need? Is it around the diversity piece, or is it around the cultural responsiveness piece?
Okay, any follow-up? Ms. Hamilton, if hired, what potential is there for you to bring in your own support staff?
Second,
What is, if hired, what potential is there for bringing in your own support staff?
well, here's what I'd say. First of all, when you're coming in as a person that's new, if you don't have a context for where you are, you need to have individuals around you who can help you develop that context. But you have to really look at, like I said, it's not their title, it's their knowledge, their skills, and the dispositions that they bring for the roles that you have based on the identified needs. So I think it's, you attract what you want based on how you clearly articulate your idea or your vision for where you want to move. And once people understand the vision, then they always have a choice whether you're gonna make a decision of whether I wanna be a part of building that vision, seeing it, owning it, supporting it, or maybe not. So I think it's about you looking at those individuals, looking at their knowledge, their skills, their disposition, and really maximizing the impact of what those individuals are able to do.
Okay. Any follow-up? Ms. Reagan?
Good evening, Ms. Hamilton. What steps would you take to evaluate the current leadership positions within the central office and provide a time when you had to repurpose an employee to move to a more productive position?
All right. So it's what I said. First of all, you start off and you look at the organizational chart, and then you start to track each individual's impact on teaching and learning. Because ultimately, if we're at the central office, our role is to support what's happening in the school building. That's why we spend our time in the school building, because we start with student needs. First of all, we identify what are our prioritized student needs. And at the district office, our role is to support teachers in providing high-quality teaching and learning to those students. Then the next layer of that is we have to support the principal to be able to support the teacher in ensuring that high-quality teaching and learning. And then it comes to the district staff. We have to be able to be lead learners, meaning that we have to understand what is our role? How do we support the principals, the teachers, and student learning? And so you start by really looking at what are the roles, what are those key roles that we have? And if we can't see a direct alignment and impact to student achievement, then you have to really consider, is that necessary? And I'll give you two examples. I'll give you one for my principalship. When I went to my second principal's job in Tangipahoa, we had an individual who was categorized as a paraprofessional, and she was a lab person. So my first 3 or 4 months, I just observed because I really wanted to see what was she really doing, what value was she adding to teaching and learning for my students. Well, ultimately, as I observed, there was really no value that she was adding because teachers went to the lab with their students anyway. So really, there was not a need because she could not attend to the children alone. So a teacher was going to be in there anyway. And so I thought, okay, that's really not a position that's benefiting us. But how I was able to multi-purpose her is that I was able to use her as a classroom interventionist. So I took her out of the lab because she wasn't adding value to students, but as an interventionist, she was able to go in, and when the teacher was working with groups of children, she also could work with a smaller group of children to be able to use. And then another time at the central office, when I was the chief academic officer, we were revising positions, and so we had an elementary supervisor's position, and there had been on the org chart a middle school position, and then we had a secondary position. So when I started to really assess the skills and the knowledge and the disposition of those individuals that I had as my principal coaches, which is what we called our supervisors elementary, I determined that, hey, those individuals, because one of them had been a principal of a K-8 school, we dissolved that middle school, middle level position, and we just used a elementary or a K-8 person, K-6, and then we did a 7 to 12 supervisor who supported principals. So that was a way that we were able to dissolve a position that really we didn't see an impact because we had people who had skills that were able to do. So we modified the job description based on the skill level of the individuals that we had who could do that job. Thank you for saying.
Any follow-up? Okay, Mr. Hill?
We all understand that job satisfaction is a key to retaining employees long-term. Aside from the pay increase, how could you probably impact staff job satisfaction?
There's a lot of research out now, and have really had the opportunity to see it as action research, because what the 3 indicators are that are related to teacher retention have to do with support, leadership, and money is the third one. So when we think about this idea of support, that goes back to my idea of really, are we providing high quality support through coaching, co-planning, co-teaching for teachers at the classroom level to help them be able to really maximize the impact of their teaching on student learning? So you do things like that. You look for opportunities. You identify people who you see that have leadership potential, and you provide leadership opportunities for them. That's through training, that's through attending conferences, that's through facilitating district level trainings, and you maximize the benefits in terms of really teacher morale by really being cheerleaders for the teachers and letting them know you appreciate the jobs that they're doing. So it's things like recognizing teachers who are perfect attendance by, putting an attendance star outside their door. When they get so many, you put those in, you do a drawing, because small things make teachers happy. People think they need big giant things. There are small things that you can do that are really cost effective, But you really have to let teachers know that you appreciate and you value them by your actions, not by what you say, but by the actions that you do. So that's what I would focus this team's work around, is really showing teachers that we value them and that we appreciate them, and providing opportunities for them to be able to build that cadre of leaders. And same thing for our school leaders, because being a school principal is a thankless job a lot of times. It is a thankless job. So being able to give them what we call defined autonomy, because if we've gone through a process and we've selected individuals that we feel that they are capable to lead the school, then at the district office, we have what we call defined autonomy, meaning there are some things that are tight on, there are some things that we're loose on, but we allow them to lead the schools. That's the key. They have to be able to lead the schools, because when their scores come out, it's not our score per se. They roll up into our scores, but it's that school's. And so if I'm going to take the responsibility of owning a score, then I have to be able to have the accountability to allow me to lead the school to own that score.
Okay. Any follow-up? Reverend Harris?
Good evening, Ms. Hamilton. What will you do to increase dual enrollment and jumpstart pathways?
You know, that's one of the things that when I started as the chief academic officer, is that, you know, we were not maximizing, because one of the things I think we have to understand, and, you know, as educators, we think college is for everybody, but it's really not. It's not for everybody. And so we have to be able to provide those opportunities for students who want to go career tech. And so we have to really have opportunities for those kids to earn certifications in areas outside of the traditional way. And then the other thing we have to do with, you know, dual enrollment, CLEP, all of those AP courses, is that, first of all, you have to clearly communicate to teachers that one of the things we're going to do is that we're going to maximize opportunities for students. Because being a parent of 2 children who earned enough credits that when they went to college, they were 1 year ahead in their degree because they did dual enrollment through the university. And so that's an opportunity when you think about that, no matter what your background is. If you graduate from high school, if you're choosing a college path and you've earned 27 to 30 credits before you step on the college campus, that is an awesome benefit to a family in ensuring that that child is going to have an opportunity to earn an associate or a bachelor's degree. And I'll give you another example. At one of our rural high schools in Tangipahoa Hope, college was just not an option for those kids. So one of the things we really started to do is we really started to focus on what are some of those technical things: welding, pipe fitting, automotive, really working with our community college. And we celebrated those students when we bring them in to celebrate. We had 4 young men who were 18 years old. They had earned their NCER certification welding to, who, when they finished school in May, they were going into their first jobs earning $27 an hour at 18 years old. Now, that's not a job, that's a career. That's a career. But that happens by really you having a strategic plan of what are you going to do to provide those opportunities for students. When we look at our data, and our data tells us that a large percentage of our students are not going to college, well, you know what that is? That's a charge to us as district leaders to say, hey, we got to figure out how to maximize opportunities for students who may not choose college right now.
Okay. Any follow-up?
Or plumbing at $100 an hour?
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Considering that each school has unique needs, what do you feel is the best way to ensure that each school receives a curriculum to meet those needs while also maintaining consistency of curriculum from grade to grade and year to year? Additionally, how will you ensure that teachers will have all the supplies they will need to implement a curriculum prior to the start of the school year? Please include in your response your thoughts on the use and support of magnet and laboratory schools.
Okay, let me see, I gotta look at that one, because it has like 3 parts. All right, let me see. Let me find it. All right, so first of all, one of the things you have to think about when you're thinking about the unique needs of each school, that goes to that differentiated and tiered support long-range plan that as a district office, we have to have. Because it's need-based, because each school has its own context, it has its own needs that's driven by the data. Student data tells us what are the priority needs at each school site. So that means when we support from the district level, we support based on a tiered scaffold approach. Just like we do teachers in a school building, we red, green, yellow teachers, and we tier the support based on where they are. You do the same thing at the school level. You tier the support based on the identified needs. So that would be one thing. When we talk about curriculum, because I spent time on the State Department's team, you know, the curriculum has been a challenge across Louisiana, wherever you go, because you know, we finally gotten what we consider a really standards-based ELA and math curriculum. But we know when it comes to social studies and science, there is still work to be done. So at the district level, that's why I said you have to use the expertise that is within this district. I can promise you right now, we can go look up some BAM data for some teachers here, and we can identify some teachers who have consistently, over time, been improving outcomes for students through social studies and science. And once we identify those individuals, you know what we do? We go to them and we say, hey, it's like Uncle Sam, we want you. We need you to be a part of a guiding coalition here in our district to help us work out a long-range plan, which includes a scope and sequence of what needs to happen in a given time frame to get our students to mastery in social studies or science, whatever it is. And so we outline this progression from, you know, here's a K-2 band of progression that by the time these children finish 2nd grade, here's the what we call majority standards or priority standards, but by the time they finish K-2, here's where they need to be. By the time they finish 3 to 5, here's where they need to be. By the time they get to 6 to 8, here's where they need to be. By the time they get to 9 to 12, and that's clearly communicated throughout the district, and the work of the district office is to support that long-range plan. And through supporting it, we're monitoring the progress that students are making, because I'm a firm believer that I don't need to wait until the state issues school performance scores for me to know where my children are. Because if I'm using a standards-based curriculum, I'm assessing them all during the year on standards-aligned assessment, and I'm making adjustments through interventions, whether it's on the high end or on the low end. I'm making those adjustments throughout the year. When the scores come in, it's just a confirmation or affirmation of the work that we've been doing. And then the last part, how will you ensure that teachers have the supplies they will need to implement a curriculum? Well, that's based on that long-range plan, because one of the things you do is, as I said, if you want to know what's happening in a district, you don't find that out at the central office. You find that out by being in schools, looking at student work, along with teachers and leaders in the building, because that's how we know what's happening with our students, because we're examining student work, student data, and then we're asking teachers, when you think about this curriculum, what are the barriers? And so you do that through 2 ways. There should be an annual survey that goes out to teachers every year, where we talk about, as we looking at, here's what our goals were for this year, here where we are, what do you see the barriers to you being able to meet those goals? And then you bring them in a couple of times. You bring in some representatives from every school, some teachers from every school in this district, and we talk twice a year, maybe in the fall, once in the spring, about, okay, as we're progress monitoring, because the data is public. So we're looking at the data that we're getting to tell us exactly where students are. And so we're talking to the people who are closest to students, and that's the teachers. And we communicate about, that's why they're really having that academic, that instructional vision, and really clearly communicating that, so people own their roles in the vision, is key. to everything that you do, but it's through the data that you're gonna drive that, and through transparency, because we have to be able to have discourse, which means that it's not always gonna be that we all gonna hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But when we finish, we're gonna be professionally respectable and come up with decisions that are gonna help us improve outcomes for students, because ultimately, that's what it's about, improving outcomes for students.
Any follow-up to that question? Okay, Mr. Trent?
Good evening, Ms. Hamilton. Our crime rate has increased dramatically, and so I would like to know what would you be able to put in place to help our children stay in school and further their education so that they won't end up in the streets as another statistic?
And you know, I think one of the things that, you know, being a part of what's considered leadership, Tangier Whole, and one of the visits that we make as a part of that is we go to the parish jail. And you know, the thing that was really eye-opening, you know, you think about it in your mind, but when you see it, you know, when we looked inside and we looked at all of those 17 to 20-something-year-old African-American males, because disproportionately, that's who was there at that particular time, I think to myself, you know what? As a system, an educational system, we failed these young men. We failed them. And so I think that's what we have to really look at. We have to look at our discipline data. We have to look at the culture of the school, because first of all, our schools have to be a place where all of our students feel like they are as important as the next person, no matter what their socioeconomic status is, who their parents are, that we have a discipline system or a positive behavior support system that's built around meeting the needs of the kids, but using the data that our data tells us. Because, you know, if we have some places and some pockets where there is a high rate of suspension for some individual places, then we have to really take a look at the quality of the teaching and the learning. Because it all goes back to that, is that if we're not engaging students at a high level and we're not monitoring their progress, then, because if we are, we know that there's going to be a percentage of students who may not make it in the regular setting. So, okay, then if they aren't, we have to make sure we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we are assessing and evaluating those students to give them the opportunity to be in the setting that's going to provide them the best opportunity to be successful. And that's what I think it's built around, is being able to be realistic and be transparent about the data and look at our practices to ensure that we have practices, we have processes that allow us to be able to see, okay, what are we maximizing the skill level and the talents of the individuals that we have to be able to meet the needs of the students that we have.
A question for you, before we take on Ms. Theresa. We're on for PBS. So tell me a little bit more about the positive behavior program that you were talking, which seemed to be more in depth.
Well, one of the things that we did as a part, because we don't look at behavior as isolated from instruction. And sometimes people do that. And that's one of those things about when we're talking about, when we're clearly communicating our instructional vision, that we understand that positive behavior support means at each school, we're going to identify through the data, first of all, what are our primary offenses? What's the primary offense that's occurring at this school? Then we're going to look at when, where, and who. That's the three. When we look at it, who's involved, where is it happening, and what time of the day. And so then you start to look at, okay, my scheduling. Then we'll start, so each school is going to identify those. And then you identify, well, what's the level? Because there's a level that you go through. You don't go from this child didn't have a pencil to suspension all in one. That's not how it works. It's a process of First of all, we're looking at what the incidence is. So there's a chain that the school determines. It's not the district level. There are going to be some guidelines that we give at the district level for an overall framework, but each school has to have their own individualized positive behavior support plan built around the data and the needs and what they have at that school setting by, first of all, what are going to be the levels and what happens consistently. So irregardless to in a school building, whoever room you're in, whatever we've decided is going to be our process, then that's the process. We know that if there's a weapon, if there's a fight, those move you to the front of the line. But every other thing, it has to do with, first of all, conference with the child, conference with the parent. What kinds of things have you done? There's some lack of recesses, there's some lack of whatever. So you start to build those things because it's based developmentally on what students want. Because what happens with elementary kids and what happens with middle school and what happens with high school, that's how you build those incentives for what you want based on the needs. And you know how you find that out? You survey kids and you ask them, if you were going to receive rewards, what would be things you would want? How would you want to be rewarded? And then you use that and you build your plan around that. And then the other thing that you do is you clearly communicate that to parents so that parents understand, here's our plan, this is how the plan is going to work. And the plan is going to work regardless to what your last name is and where you live.
It's all tied in the school improvement plan?
Correct.
And you mentioned about data-driven, everything is data-driven.
Mm-hmm.
But it's based on what that person indicates on the reports and the forms. So sometimes you might not get a true picture of what actually is occurring in some instances. So you still have a problem.
Are you asking me a question?
Yeah, I am because there are instances certain things happening. The reports, if the reports are not filled out, if they don't follow the process, and then.
That goes back to, you think about what I said in the beginning. First of all, if we have a clearly articulated process of what our expectation is, well, you know how we ensure that happens? We train people and then we go support them in the process. So when the first batch of, first couple of weeks, if we're looking at the data at the central office, and if we're seeing some disparities and what's happening, then you know what we do? We go sit down, we have a talk with the principal and say, hey, let's pull some data, because if you want people to improve their practice, you have to coach them around what it is you expect. So that means you got to go spend some time modeling with them, working through the process with them. So that shouldn't be a consistent problem. That might happen initially, but you train them first, because if you want to hold people responsible for something, the first thing you have to do is ensure that they are trained and they understand what the expectation is. That's why you have to be clear in what your expectations are. And so once you do that, then you hold people accountable if they're not doing what you know they have been trained to do.
You pretty much answered my questions, but elaborate on this a little bit further if you would. How do we create a community and district-wide culture of continuous improvement, and how would you align your plans to achieve those goals?
Well, when I think about a continuous, or as I said, next level package, it's about improving the district and the school's performance goal. Well, how do you do that? You provide a cohesive support system based on prioritized school needs that's driven by data. Because then it's not what I think, what I feel, because we have to take the emotions out of it. We have to let the data drive the decisions that we're making. And then you have to share that vision for instructional excellence. And how do you do that? You have to engage all stakeholders, you have to implement it, and you have to get ownership of it by ensuring that there's a common language and a common understanding of what that instructional vision is. Then you have to do that by strengthening classroom instruction through tiered and differentiated support. I talked about that. Through your recruitment and your retention practices. Then you have to ensure that you have that high quality professional learning for teachers and school leaders through collaborative practices and shared leadership by using the district team to serve and support school-based needs. Then community engagement, as I talked about, you have to use some aspects of social media to celebrate and share your story, because if you don't, you allow other people to tell your story. And that, you can't allow that. We have to be able to tell our story, celebrate the small wins as we're building momentum for those big wins. You have to be able to strengthen partnerships, whether it's with Northwestern State University, it's through community engagement, through, listening tours and going to different parts of the community, really talking about, here's our instructional excellence vision, and here's how we need you to be a part of that, and clearly articulating that.
Okay. Ms. Hamilton, we are at a point where we have questions, and we'd like you to move into your closing remarks.
All right. So as I think about the opportunity to be the superintendent of Natchez School System, I feel like my life's work has been about leadership and really building cohesive learning teams with transparency and trust at the core of what I've been able to do. I've been able to lead by sharing a vision and having a commitment to public education through using shared leadership. And I feel like that's the key to move Natchez through to the next level. And so throughout my career, as I've worked my way through from teaching to leadership, I have these principles that I call Hamilton's habits. They're called H squared. And what that is, it's about honesty. Meaning you have to really take a look inside of yourself to see what's the work that we're doing. Are we doing quality work? And really be able to self-assess and make decisions. It's about attitude. What do we believe? Do we believe that every student in Natchez Parish has the opportunity to be productive citizens? And if we believe that, then our actions have to line up to that. Then we have behaviors. What are those behaviors that we are demonstrating that's guiding us, the work that we're doing? Then you have individual goals, because wherever you are in the district, you should have an individual goal that's tied to teaching and learning and student achievement. Then the T, teamwork, because we're better together. It's going to take all of us. And then that last S stands for synergy. And when I think about synergy, it's about taking all of the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions of a collective of individuals and making it greater than what we would be if we worked individually. And I believe if that's what you're looking for in Natchez Parish, and you're ready to move Natchez Parish to the next level, I can be a part of that by working hand in hand with you to move student achievement in Natchez Parish to the next level.
Okay. Any follow-up with your closing remarks?